A stinky kid that no one likes, another kid who loses both his thumbs. What happens when you go outside with an umbrella on a rainy day? All of that on today's most amazing top 10 list. Coming in at number 10, we have Die Grieschit von Beißen Frederik. Our next story translates to either cruel or wicked Frederick. I think it depends on what era you're born in, but this story is pretty much about a sociopath in the making. The story starts with cruel Frederick running around killing birds, just random birds that he finds. He finds them and he kills them and he rips their wings off. And this isn't even to eat them, he just wants to kill them for his own sick pleasure.
No, you need help. I need help?
Who does that? And the story only gets worse from there. He starts to destroy furniture and then he finds some poor lady named Mary and he starts whipping her. First of all, what is wrong with this kid? And second of all, why on earth does this kid have a whip? Who gives a kid a whip? Then there's a dog that shows up at this kid's house and he starts whipping the dog. And then the dog gets pissed and it mauls cruel Frederick's leg. And then the story ends with him in bed because his foot is infected and the dog is sitting at the dinner table eating his food. So I guess the moral of the story is don't be an evil child of Satan or you'll get attacked by wild animals and maybe starve to death. Next on the list we have Struwelpeter. This story translates to Shaggy Peter. And while being shaggy now in this day and age with ripped jeans and face tattoos is hip and cool, back when this story was written in 1845, they didn't feel the same way. Well, maybe that was just Germany. I don't know if there's a bunch of people running around with face tattoos in the 1800s in New England, who knows. But this story is about a boy who gets too damn shaggy. He never wants to groom himself, he has fingernails that grow super long and his hair needs to be brushed, but it's also so long because he never cuts it. Also, the story specifically talks about how he's covered in soot. I don't really think that's a problem anymore. I think the equivalent to being covered in soot is like being covered in Cheeto dust. The modern version of this story should be Cheeto Dust Charlie and the sticky fingers that ruined his Xbox controller. Someone in the comments please tell me how to say that in German. But pretty much what happens to old Shaggy Peter is that no one likes him. He stinks, he's hairy, he's got fingernails so long he could scratch his next door neighbor's ear holes. So the moral of the old tale is be clean or people won't like you. In 1845, we hadn't started telling kids that it's what's on the inside that counts.
You're ugly.
Coming in at number 8, we have Fidgety Phillips. This story is a warning to kids who can't sit still at the dinner table. But before I dive into this one, don't forget to like this video. The story goes that young Philip is at the dinner table with his parents and is being pretty rambunctious. Eventually, after moving around way too much, he ends up tipping his chair over. In his fall, he ends up bringing the entire dinner table and everything on it down with him and makes a complete mess. He is under the tablecloth with all of the dinner scraps over top and all around him. His parents are of course extremely upset at him for ruining all their plates and glasses and the dinner that they had made for everyone. The boy ended up not getting to eat dinner and had to go hungry that day. If you take anything from this story, just make sure you're minding your manners at the dinner table. Moving on to our number 7 spot, we have the story of Augustus who wouldn't have any soup. This story is about a boy named Augustus who was a healthy little boy with round cheeks. Augustus never had a problem eating and also ate whatever he was told to and never let his soup get cold. But one winter day, something changed in Augustus. When his soup was placed in front of him that day, he threw a tantrum and refused to eat it. He threw his spoon across the room and yelled to get that nasty soup away from him. The next day, he was visibly thinner from not getting his nutrients, but he still refused to eat his soup. The next day, the same thing, and the days that followed. He was withering away in front of everyone's eyes. On the 4th day, he was so thin he hardly outweighed a sugar plum. The story takes a dark turn on the 5th day when he ends up being found dead.
At number 6 we have Die Grieschit von Fliegenden Robert. This one is the story of Flying Robert. He goes out during a rainy day and he has his umbrella and he ends up floating away. And the last line of the story is literally he was never seen again. The moral of the story is to tell kids not to go outside when it's gross and rainy outside, but how harsh does the story have to be? The kid couldn't just come home with a cold and get a little sick and then get better. No, he had to float away from the wind, picking him up by his umbrella, and then he would vanish from society. Jesus.
In our number 5 spot, we have the Girl Without Hands story. This story is about a father who gets offered money by a strange man. The man tells the father that if he gives him whatever is standing behind the mill, then he will give him the money. Unbeknownst to the father, this strange man is actually the devil. The man agrees because he believes that there is only an apple tree standing behind the mill, but to his unfortunate surprise, his daughter was actually standing behind it. When the devil goes to take the daughter away, she fights back. She is so pure that she is able to resist his grip, but the devil still wants to take something with him. He tells the father and daughter that he will leave if the father will chop off his daughter's hands to give to him. Of course, at first they said absolutely not, but then the devil threatened to take the father away if they didn't agree. So unfortunately, that father and daughter had no choice and were forced to chop off her hands. I definitely don't want to go to sleep after hearing that one.
And number 4, we have Digression von den Wilden Jäger. Also, if I'm pronouncing these wrong, I want to apologize to everyone watching the video. This translates to the story of the Wild Huntsman. This is a tale about a dude who wanted to head out and hunt some rabbit for his dinner. While he was out hunting, the day gets super hot and this dude was like, why should I hunt in the sun when I can just take a nap and start hunting again later? Smart dude. Well, it turns out not so smart. When he was sleeping, the rabbit steals his gun and his glasses and then starts shooting at him. He starts running away in terror because the rabbit is trying to kill him and he can barely see without his glasses. The huntsman manages to run back to his cottage where his wife is waiting for him. His wife hears a ton of commotion and comes out to see her husband being hunted by a rodent. In a final attempt to survive, the huntsman jumps down a well and his wife screams in terror and drops her coffee on her foot and burns herself, and the rabbit and the rabbit's baby celebrate. I don't even know what the moral of the story is. Don't sleep on the job or animals will gain sentience and try to murder you in front of your loved ones?
In our number 3 spot, we have Max and Moritz. This story is about 2 little rascals who like to pull pranks. In the story, they pull off 7 different pranks. Some of their pranks include stealing a widow's chicken, breaking a bridge and then making the tailor walk over it so that he falls into the river below, and filling a teacher's pipe with gunpowder so that when he lights it, it blows up in his face. Needless to say, these boys are pretty reckless and pretty cruel. Eventually, someone decides it's time to prank the boys back, but this is where things take an even darker turn. This prank ends up being less of a prank and more of an extremely severe punishment. The boys end up getting baked into bread and fed to the chickens. I can't believe that this is actually a story told to children. The boys did play some pretty harmful pranks, but I'm not sure if this extent was necessary. I guess it's a lesson to be kind and treat others well.
At number 2, we have Daigotorre Grishiti mi Frierzig. There's my German. I'm killing it. Killing it at German today. My German's the best. This translates to a very sad story with matches. And it's about a girl named Harriet who is left home alone. Her parents have a box of matches on the countertop and tell her not to touch them, but this little girl loves fire. And so the girl doesn't listen to her parents and she lights a match anyways. And then her clothes light on fire and she burns until there's nothing left but her smoldering ashes on the ground. And then her cats cry a stream of tears out of their face, and that's the end. That's the end of the story. The lesson is obviously don't play with matches, and the secret message is how you give a child a lifelong fear of fire.
In our number 1 spot today, we have the story of Little Suck a Thumb. This story starts off with a mom leaving her young son Conrad at home. She explains that she needs to leave for a little while, but warns him not to suck his thumb while she is away or else. She says that the great tall tailor always finds little boys who suck their thumbs and takes big sharp scissors and cuts them off, and explains that thumbs can't grow back. The mom leaves, and then almost immediately after, the boy begins sucking his thumb. He had been warned, but absolutely did not listen. Soon, the door flew open and a tailor began running in with scissors. I'm not sure why the tailor cares so much about it, but he ends up chasing the boy around and snipping off his thumbs. When the mom comes home, she sees the boy standing there and apparently he just looks sad. I feel like I would be a lot more than sad if somebody cut off my thumbs, but I guess it is just a story. The mom then says she knew that the tailor would come to naughty little little suck-a-thumb, which seems like kind of an insensitive response. Starting off in our number 10 spot. In the small town of Salkia in 1992, a police officer was getting off of his long shift around midnight. He was ready to head home after a long day and exited the police station to see his driver sitting there waiting for him. He got into the passenger side front seat and the two began their drive home. The roads were very empty this night and there were barely any other people around, but suddenly they saw a human figure in the distance that ended up being a woman who was asking for help. The two stopped the car and the police officer asked if she needed a ride. The driver was very superstitious and wasn't comfortable with the woman entering the car, but he figured that if he didn't look at her and with the police officer there, that everything should be fine. The police officer had a hard time seeing her clearly because it was dark, but the most noticeable thing about her was her beautiful sparkling red sari and all of her amazing gold jewelry. They asked where she was going to and the woman explained that she was trying to get to the nearby temple. As they drove on, the police officer began to doze off since he was so tired from his long shift, but was suddenly awoken by the screeching from the brakes of the car. When he opened his eyes, he realized that they had arrived at the temple, and the driver asked the police officer if he could let the woman know that they had arrived, but when the police officer turned around, there was no one in the back seat, and all the windows were closed with the car doors locked from inside.
And at number 9 we have Manachua. But if you guys are liking this video so far, then come on, you guys know the drill. Make sure to give it a big thumbs up because it really helps us out. In India, the Manachua is known as a light-emitting entity, or as its name translates to, it's also known as the face scratcher. Now this story all started off as a tale to scare children, until in 2002 when it seemed to come to life. During this time, several villagers reported seeing a UFO beam of light. When they got close to it, it scratched them. Others were left with bruises on their face and arms. Some say it felt like a hawk-like metal claw on their skin. People were so spooked that temples held prayers, while other villagers stayed up at night around bonfires with weapons, just waiting for it. Now, the stories of the face scratcher are continually shared. To this day, they don't know exactly what happened back in 2002.
In our number 8 spot, we have the story of the town of Kuldera. This town has been abandoned since 1825 and no one really knows why, but there are some theories. There are structures in the village that date all the way back to the 13th century when it was once a very lively village. Local lore says that 1,000 people who lived in the village just vanished into thin air one day. There is no one who knows why they left and where they all ended up, and some of the theories start with people believing that the wells were poisoned. Others believe that a ruler was raising the taxes for the diminishing water supply, but this still doesn't explain how everyone just vanished. One night, the Indian Paranormal Society spent a night there and reported a ton of paranormal activity, such as disembodied whispers, screams, and other noises. No one has ever tried to settle there since its abandonment because there is a legend that the village chief cursed the land, and if you try and live there, you will die.
Making our way down the list at number 7, we have Nalba or Naliba. I'm sorry, I really don't know how to pronounce it. In the 90s, kids in Bangalore were spooked about stories of a witch who stalks the streets at night knocking on doors of houses. As she does this, she will use the voice of a loved one, usually their mother, to trick the owners into opening the doors. But if you answer the door, then you will die. Even if you manage to survive from her that night, you will mysteriously die the next day. In order to avoid encountering her, people would write Nalba on the door, which means come tomorrow. The witch would then see the sign and come again tomorrow to try and kill you. But as long as the words were still written on the door, you were safe from her. It's just like a big circle. It's like, oh, I'll come tomorrow. Oh, I'll come tomorrow. Oh, okay, I'll keep coming tomorrow. And then she just never gets you. So it's good.
In our number 6 spot today, we have the story of Dr. L. Dr. L was a doctor in a small town in South India, and one night after closing up his clinic, he was asleep at home. There was a knock on his door, and when the doctor's grandmother opened it, she saw a man who explained that his wife, who was pregnant, desperately needed the doctor's help. The grandmother didn't want to wake Dr. L, but the man was very persistent. When Dr. L woke up, he packed his medical bag and headed off with the stranger. There weren't a lot of streetlights in the area, so it was fairly dark as Dr. L followed this man home. The man kept apologizing for waking up the doctor, but explained that he had no other choice. When the stranger went to head through a graveyard, Dr. L understandably hesitated, but ultimately followed him through. In the graveyard, the two approached a lamppost that gave Dr. L a much better view of this stranger, and this is when he realized that the stranger had no face, and he was just clothes hanging in the air. He of course freaked out and said that he had forgotten some equipment and needed to go home to get it. Luckily, Dr. L was able to make it home, very frightened but safe. The next day, Dr. L went to the mayor's office to try and explain to him why he should be installing more streetlights without giving away exactly what he had seen the night before. After vaguely explaining the story to the mayor then explained how lucky the doctor was because there had been 3 doctors who previously went missing under those exact same circumstances. They got lured out at night by an emergency and were never seen again. Who was this invisible ghost?
We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Malcha Mahal. Legend goes that this place is haunted. There have been a number of stories of people going in and never making it out alive. Especially a number of journalists went missing exploring this place. Now, according to local legend, the Malcha Mahal was given to Princess Mahal by the government. She lived there with her 2 kids and dogs. Yet the place was run down, infested with bugs, and had no running water or electricity. How they managed to survive in there, isolated from others, still remains a mystery. But eventually, the princess couldn't take living there anymore and took her own life. She did this by swallowing crushed diamonds. Her kids went on living without her. They would only wear black robes and could be seen occasionally going out to get food or supplies. In fact, for several years, the place was guarded and any trespassers would be shot down. After their death, the palace was open to the public and is now said to be haunted by the souls that died there. So be careful. You may enter the place no problem, but you may not make it out alive.
In our number 4 spot, we have this story about a writer. A writer decided to move into his grandparents' house a few years after they had passed in order to have some time alone and be able to get some writing done. The house was a huge but very old mansion, and it certainly needed more people tending to it than just this one man, and he found himself so distracted by the repairs that the house needed, so he began to go on walks to try and get his writing ideas flowing. His favorite route took him through the edge of the forest and then out to a country road that landed right in the middle of 2 cemeteries. When he continued on this country road, it would take him to a little town where he could get food and drinks, but at night he said the town had a strange feeling, like he should avoid it. One night the writer couldn't sleep around 2 AM, so he decided to take his walk. It had rained and the smell of the fresh earth was very invigorating, and he ended up getting caught up in his own thoughts instead of being on the lookout. He should have realized that there were no sounds of birds or insects or any kind of animal, but he was totally distracted. When he got to the country road, he was almost at the little town when he thought that he should head back home. This is when he saw a lantern bobbing up and down and decided to let the man who was holding it fall into step with him. The writer had a flashlight on, so the man put out his lantern, but the writer wasn't exactly sure if he could see the man, although he could definitely hear him. The two struck up a conversation, but eventually the writer began to get a bad feeling. He stopped to light a cigarette, and he realized he couldn't hear the other man's footsteps. The writer asked if the man was okay, and the man replied, "You have narrowly escaped." The writer sprinted back to his house where he was finally safe. When he told the story to other people in the town, they explained that it must have been an apparition. Since they are repelled by warmth and light, the fact that he lit his cigarette might have saved him that night.
In our 3rd spot, we have the Lady in White. Sanjayvan is a beautiful but haunted city forest area in Delhi, India. Among the wildlife and nature, apparently there are a lot of ghosts that like to lurk there. In particular, a lady in white. On a bunch of different occasions, a number of visitors have seen this lady. Story goes that she likes to stand and just stare at people passing by. But it doesn't seem like she wants to cause harm, so that's good. She's not the only ghost in that area though. Others have heard ghostly sounds of a baby crying and a girl laughing. Others have felt like they were being watched, or even have felt a cold presence by them. It's believed that this area is haunted because there's a bunch of unmarked grave sites in that area. In fact, stories of the area spook so many people that there's actually a notice board there that warns people not to stay there after dark.
In our number 2 spot today, we have the story of the Morgan House. The Morgan House is a very popular tourist development in Kalimpong. beautiful. Its beauty draws a lot of people to the present-day Heritage Hotel. Back in its day, it used to see a lot of large, elegant parties since the beautiful wood and stone structures are the perfect backdrop. But it is now known as a haunted hotel. It is said that the spirit of Lady Morgan never left the house. It was built specifically for Lady Morgan and her husband to get married, but after she died a premature death, Mr. Morgan had to leave the house. The story goes that Lady Morgan was actually tortured by her husband before her death, so it is said that her ghost is rightfully very unhappy. People have reported being able to hear high-heeled shoes tapping in the corridor when no one is around.
And in our number 1 spot, we have Dumas Beach. This is said to be one of the most haunted places in India. Story goes that the black sand beach was an ancient burial ground, and so spirits still roam there throughout the day and especially during the night. In fact, it's believed that the sand on the beach is black because of the amount of ash created by burning the dead there. The ash then mixed with the white sand and turned the whole beach dark, meaning that a lot of bodies got burned and buried there. One story of the area that's really creepy is this one. One day a group of friends went to the beach at night to see if it truly was haunted. The whole time while they were there, they felt like something was watching them and they got really creeped out. So they took a bunch of photos and then left. Upon reviewing the photos, they realized that they captured tons of orbs, and in one photo, they captured a shadowy figure right behind one of the friends. Very creepy. Starting us off this countdown, we have the black curtains. This story will teach you to always listen to your mother. So once upon a time, there was a mother, father, little girl, and her brother. One day, the mother entrusted her daughter with a task. She told her to go to the store to buy curtains. She said, "Whatever you do, don't buy black curtains." But what did the girl do? She ended up buying black curtains and then hung them up in her home. Well, that night, the black curtains choked her father to death. The next night, they choked her mother. The following night, they choked her brother. It wasn't until all 3 of her family members were dead when she decided to tell the police. Like, hello, wouldn't you have told them after the first death? Anyways, the police ended up hiding out in the girl's house, and when the curtain went to choke her at night, they shot at it. The curtains let out a sharp scream and oozed out black blood, and they died. So, what can you take away from the story? Don't buy black curtains, listen to your mom, and don't wait until the last second to call the authorities.
Heading on down to number 9, we have the Baba Yaga. Before I dive in, don't forget to like this video because it really helps us out. The Baba Yaga is a scary old hag who takes children to her little wooden shack that's on these stilts, described as chicken legs. When they get there, she throws the children onto the stove to cook and eats them. In the original mythology, she would transport people from the world of the dead to the world of the living. The tale comes from a time when people being buried would be placed in houses on high stilts, which makes people believe that the Baba Yaga lived in the sanctuary of the dead. She served as a guardian of ancestral heritage and would conduct a ritual to turn a boy into a warrior. A young boy would be searching for his lost bride when he gets kidnapped by the hag. If the boy is able to pass the tests and avoid death, she will tell them how they can find their missing bride. The tests include heavy physical trials and beatings, and many boys and their mothers were afraid of her.
Moving on to number 8, we have Liha. Liha can translate to bad luck. In Russian folklore, the Liha is a creature associated with evil and misfortune. It can either appear as an old skinny woman in black with one eye, or a creepy male goblin with one eye, but it's usually the latter. So there are a bunch of different stories surrounding this creature, each with different morals. In one version, a person cheats Liha, they run away from him, then they grab something valuable like gold or money out of greed, but their hands get stuck to it, so Liha comes to cut off their hands. In another version, Liha cheats the person and hops on his neck. The person wants to then drown Liha, so he jumps into a river, but he ends up drowning and Liha floats away safely. So there are many stories and versions of Liha, all meant to scare kids and teach them different lessons.
Moving on to number 7, we have the Boginka. It is said that these female swamp demons are the souls of midwives, old maids, unmarried mothers, pregnant women who die before childbirth, or abandoned children born out of wedlock. They are depicted as these ugly, naked, limping creatures who are most dangerous for children. The creature is said to kidnap babies just after they're born and replace the child with its own children, who are called changelings. The changelings were easily recognizable with their disproportionate bodies, usually with a huge abdomen and either unusually small or large heads, a hump, and really thin arms and legs. The changelings were obviously wicked creatures and were apparently very spiteful to all the humans around them. To protect the human baby from being taken by these creatures, the mother had to tie a red ribbon around its hand, put a little red hat on its head, and shield the baby's face from the moon. If the child was kidnapped, there is a chance to get it back. The mother would have to take the changeling to an old dump, whip it with a birch twig, and pour water from an eggshell on the changeling while saying, "Take yours, give me mine back." Eventually, the creature would feel bad for her changeling and give back the human baby in exchange for the creature one.
Making our way down the list at number 6, we have the casket on wheels. And yes, it's just as horrifying as it sounds. It's legit a casket on wheels. Some of these caskets even have a propeller to help it move. So basically, this casket just roams the streets. If you do something wrong, then it will appear and haunt you. Once it starts haunting you, you are ultimately powerless. The coffin also has a voice that says things like, "The coffin on wheels knows your town and is looking for your home. The coffin on wheels knows your home and is looking for your front door. The casket on wheels has already found your house and is now searching for your apartment." You get the idea. It does this to taunt you. No matter what you do, you can't escape it. The person in the story either gets dragged to hell by the coffin, mauled to death by a monster in the coffin, and then dragged to hell, or the person takes their own life. So, don't sin, or else you're gonna end up like one of those guys in hell.
In our halfway mark at number 5, we have the Russian mermaids Rusalka. These mermaids hide at night in the lakes and riversides, waiting for people to walk by. If someone gets too close to the water, the mermaids will grab them and pull them down to the bottom, where they tickle them to death. The mermaids also have a master called Vodyanoi, who is the spirit of water and looks like a weird frog creature thing. It is said that the master can ascend to the sky to create new bodies of water and can also drown people. The main target of him is girls who go swimming in the lakes after sunset. One of the creepiest parts about this is that he takes the prettiest girls that he drowns to be his wives.
Moving on to number 4, we have the Black Volga. This is a Russian legend that was also told to children at bedtime. But it wasn't just a popular story in Russia. No, it was also popular in Poland, Greece, and Hungary. That's how big this legend was. So during the 1960s to 1970s, there was a story going on surrounding a mysterious Black Volga that was kidnapping people, mainly kids. Eventually, people started to believe that the devil himself was driving the car. Some even say the car didn't have side mirrors. Instead, it had horns on either side. To this day, some people believe this story to be real.
Coming in at our number 3 spot, we have the Koshchei, whose name is likely derived from the word for bone. He is basically a skeleton wrapped in very thin skin and resides in a limbo between life and death. He has magical powers and is immortal, and he usually ends up in stories with a lot of wealth. He is known for kidnapping young girls to make them his wives, which ends up leading the girl's human groom to try and battle and defeat Koshchei in order to save her. His death is said to be at the end of the needle in an egg, the egg in a duck, the duck in a rabbit, and the rabbit in a trunk locked in chains hanging from the top of an oak tree. So basically, it's not really easy to take him down. It is also said that he is blind, and in order to be able to see his enemies, he asks his servants to lift his eyelids.
And at number 2, we have the Red Piano. This is a pretty famous Russian story, and it's pretty creepy too. Basically, it surrounds this little girl that received a piano as a present for her birthday. As it was delivered, they were told that if something happens to it, Only one lady in town could fix it. It was just some old random lady. Anyways, the girl was so excited to finally learn how to play. After a couple weeks of playing, the girl complained to her parents saying her fingers hurt, but they told her it was normal because she just wasn't used to playing. She kept practicing, but the more she practiced, the more she grew thinner and paler. Then after a month, the piano broke, so they called up that old lady to fix it. Now, when she arrived, she told the girl and her parents to let her fix the piano in peace. She didn't want any distractions, so she shut the door and told them to leave her alone. A little while later, the piano was fixed and the girl continued playing. But as she played daily, she continued to grow sicker and sicker. Then the piano broke again. So the lady came in again to fix it. This time, the parents were curious, so they decided to peek inside through the keyhole. And what they saw was horrifying. They saw the old lady open the piano and take out a glass jar filled with what looked like blood. Then she started to drink it. Turns out that the piano keys had tiny needles built into them, invisible to the naked eye. When the girl played the piano would cut her and drain her blood. Then the piano was designed to break when the jar was full, so that the old lady could come in and drink the blood. I know what you're thinking. How on earth is this a bedtime story?
In our number 1 spot today, we have the Kikimoras. Kikimoras are evil spirits that usually remain invisible. While these creatures live pretty much anywhere, their favorite spots are in human homes because they love to create trouble. They like to poorly spin yarn and get the wool all tangled up. If they settle into your home, they'll give you nightmares, they'll break the things in your house, and they will even bother your pets. It is said that you can protect your home from them with juniper branches and sagebrush. If a Kikimora decides to show itself to you, then you are bound to have some misfortune come your way very soon. One way the Kikimoras travel is if a sorcerer places their spirit inside a ceremonial doll and throws it at the home of an innocent person.
Alright, and now we're moving on to our comment shoutout portion. We'll be shouting out comments from the video Top 10 Tweets That Predicted the Future.
PH Bacon Cyan Plays says, plot twist, the guy that tweeted there's going to be COVID was actually making the virus. Maybe he was.
I don't know, he was just like, COVID's gonna be soon, and then he's just like in his little lab cooking it up. I don't even know if he...
I hate that guy if that's the truth.
Orkai XD maybe commented, maybe that Lady Gaga person was actually her. Can you imagine Lady Gaga like having a fake Twitter account and be like, she's gonna release an album soon, wink wink, and it's actually her.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Maybe.
Night Howler commented, all I want for Christmas is Lindsay to say my name or shout out. It doesn't matter, they're the same thing. There you go, Night Howler, there's your Christmas present.
Andy Soap Chick says, love the channel. A shout out would be cool. I'd love to see someone pronounce my name right. Well, Andy, I'm really hoping that I just did that.
You got the Andy part right.
Yes, hopefully.
But Sob Chick? I feel like it's something like tricky like that. Like,
yeah.
so she? Maybe, well, maybe the B is like silent, you know? They're trying to trick us. So she?
Andy, whatever your last name is,
Andy!
I get the struggle.
Alright, that's all the comments we're shouting out for today's video. Make sure to comment something down below for a chance to be featured in our next comment shout out. And as always, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to Most Amazing Top 10 for more amazing videos. I've been your host, Lindsay Ivan.
I'm Olivia Kozlovsky.
I'll see you when I see ya.
The mermaids also have a master called Vodyanoi. It is also said that he is blind, and in order to be able to see his enemies, he asks his servants to lift his eyelids. I don't want to work for that guy.
No.
Ew.
Come here. Lift the eyelids. That's why I'm imagining it.
Ew.
And just like peel it back. No.
Ooh.